Are there questions or comments or things you feel need to be raised or said, or responses or fears or excitements, or what's happening for you now as you sit here and read our last hour, less than, of this, not of life?
Ken was first, but anyway.
I'd love to ask a practical question about Bethany. And so I know it's not part of an institutional form of church, it's a community. But I wonder, are there still struggles in the community? You're struggling with the text and wrestling with the text. Do you ever struggle with each other? Yeah, I just, because my big question is, where does this anchor? How do we ground it? Who are the people? All of that, and I'm a practical person.
I mean, the struggle with the text is, I mean, like, I'm a kind of teacher, you know, so I do a lot of work with the text and I hand it on to the community. But then you take other people like Ruben and Mac, that they're very well acquainted with the text. And they're able to support it and then run the seven, and Linda, of course, run the 7 stories. So that is not really problematic. I mean, I feel that the interpretation speaks for itself. You know, like it's not a huge struggle once you've done the groundwork. And the struggle, there is that truth to it. The struggle took place over really 30 years. So it was in something like 2000. What are we looking at? So it's something like 2012 or 13 that we first began to create the book, The 7 Stories. And that was because we had a woman who's still with us. Her name is Heather. She's very central to our work. And if you ever on Zoom, you'll see her. She was our next door neighbor. Things always work that way. You don't make converts out of the blue. It's your next door neighbor, or your nephew or somebody, you know, someone who's you have a relationship with. But she was complaining in a genuine sense that this is very hard to communicate to other people because there's so many angles to it, and you have to go through it to get. And I find myself, just reduced to stupidity, you know, because I can't explain it to other people. I'll say some things, and then they'll say, "But what about this?" And so we said, "Well, we have to have a book." And we went to this evangelical retreat center called Adam's Eden. It's a very beautiful place, and they had this really well-produced booklet about their beliefs, and lots of pictures and stuff, and the text was in different colors. It was very well done. And everybody said, "We need something like that." It was very mimetic, you know, and we had nothing. You know. And so we said, okay, we need to produce something that people can just physically get hold of and they can refer to. And so what we did was we came up with 7 stories, and each person, I went through the stories, then I had each person in the group, or a number of people in the group, to repeat the story themselves, to teach it themselves back, and then to discuss it again, and finally to create a text that we then edited. And actually, very strangely, you should ask that question, because it's this very morning, a young woman by the name of Marina Goba, who was our book designer and did a good job, I think, on the book. She was a student at SU at Syracuse University, and I wrote to her back in November saying, "We want to do a book on Paul. Can you help us?" Zilch, there was no answer. And this very morning she says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I just got back to my Facebook, and I saw your message. And I would love to help." So she was the kind of blast from the past who did a great job. She was really good to work with, and she's going to help us on our Paul book. So there was that journey of trying to get this thing out. But once we got it out, Heather stopped complaining.
Also, I was thinking, does the Sunday morning community, when new people join it, are they joining because they've done some of this work, or, what's the process of bringing people along?
Well,
How do you be community around this is one of...
We're still very much beginning at that. I mean, we've been having meetings really for 25 years, and we've been through a number of generations, really, and we've had some really serious blowouts. I mean, people who, who crashed out, and we crashed out. Like the relationship didn't work out, and it wasn't. It was a failure on all sides. We've had those experiences, and in the preface to the new book that the book that I've just written, it has an appendix on community, and it says that we would consider failure as much a part of our journey as success, because no one who's been through our studies has been left untouched. And they find, and we've had many people who were, a number of people, a plurality, who are part of cults, real Christian cults, who are under especially women, all women, under very serious repression as women. And as one of them says, I can hear her voice now saying it, "Tony, you have de-weaponized the text for me," And that's what happened. And we've taken the fangs out of the text for her. So then they go off, they say, "Oh, I can fly now. I am untrammeled. Bye-bye. See you." So they're done. They don't stay with the community experience. But that's okay. So we remain spoiled. Go on, Linda. Go on.
So little by little, I think when we started out, we were kind of thinking we would start a movement or start an organ.
Yeah.
We didn't really know what we thought. And I remember the very first time we sat down as a small group of people, it's only about 3 or 4 of us, and we thought we would draw from all the best bits of our Christian, so the Taizé community, our work with the homeless and the ecumenical group there that was living on site, and then the social action stuff that we'd done, and then the contemplation stuff that we'd learned in Italy and Spello. And we thought, well, we'll take all the best bits and we'll create the ideal Christian community. And then we had people, lived in... Yeah, well, we had people living in, we shared
Absolutely.
our house. We shared our house and our things in common. We were doing the radical thing. And of course it crashed
because it was
a horrendous...
It was an object of desire.
conflict.
We set up an object of desire.
Yeah, and so
there was rivalry right from the beginning.
And people were kind of attracted to it. People would come and we were sort of semi-successful in some sense. But after it, that was probably the worst of the crash and burns. And we ended up with just Tony and me and Heather, who was our next door neighbor, one time in our house, and we were thinking, should we just call it a day, But then almost like the next week, 2 people showed up, and it was like a rebirth. So the Holy Spirit doesn't abandon you, even though, but we did learn that you have to let go of your ego a lot, and that's, so our ideas of what successful Christian community is not what the Holy Spirit's ideas are. And so...
and in the meantime, we're
So I mean, basically, it's a fluid thing, and as things stand right now, Tony and I are actually made the decision to hand over Bethany House to Heather and her husband and a group, the core group that meets regularly. So we're actually taking a step back from the local, physical, maintaining the space. I mean, when I say Bethany House, it's really our house, our home, which we've divided into sections. So we have community space and we have our own living space, that kind of thing. But Heather's buying us out, and we're going to be sort of semi-retiring, but continuing our online Bible study, online stuff.
And we've never seen ourselves as a church. That's important. So it's a strategic thing. We don't want to set up rivalry between ourselves and the institution. So people come to us from other institutions. Of course there is. I mean, I have my own baggage, certainly. But we want to create a kind of... It's like mushrooms or something or other, that apparently they grow a lot underground before they pop up, We're in the growing underground phase, That's exactly right. You know that stuff. Well, that's what it is. So we don't try to set up a kind of Sunday worship thing. What we have is yoga on a Sunday, because Heather is very good at yoga, and she has developed a practice of Christian Jesus yoga, she calls it. So she prays all the way through all the movements, and they become worshipful. So it's full body, it's whole body worship, and it's very. Then we have some contemplation, but it's always a small group, 5, 6, 7 people. It's not. But they're practices of their pre-church practices. What was that word you used? Basilian network. That's what it is. It's pre-organization. But I am conscious that I would love this to be strong enough and impactful in community enough that it did have a larger organizational identity, because that's the only way you can get the attention of the world. But that's not where we're at the moment. We're just not there. And we have to do that slow maturing, preparing the ground work. And maybe that will continue for a long time. But that's what we do. We're preparing the ground in people's minds and hearts. And people know of us, and maybe they look askance at us. I'm sure they do, because we don't contribute significantly to society. But in terms of, all right. But anyway, sorry. Go on.
Tony, a couple of thoughts. Your line about Jesus betting his all on the vision and pathway from Daniel. I love that phrase. Thank you for that. And showing us that it was one of a few options amongst the community of his day under occupation. That there were other pathways, but that he chose deliberately and bet his all on Daniel's presence, faithful presence, nonviolent commitment, and it killed him.
It killed him, yeah. It's pretty amazing.
That death at one level is not the surprise at all. It's the logical end, and it's the resurrection that upon which the whole nonviolent proposition stands.
Absolutely.
That it's without the resurrection, it's the zealots were right.
Yeah, absolutely right. Benjamin Netanyahu is right.
Yeah, that this is not a nice afterthought, or even just it's not a reward for good behaviour.
Yeah, right.
It's an assertion against the darkness. And therefore it's that upon which the whole enterprise stands. And I love that. I am deeply inspired and encouraged by that. That we had a former president of our Uniting Church National, president, who once said that the Uniting Church is an apocalyptic church.
Oh, really?
And as a relatively progressive church, that language was, what do you mean? We presume that means it's about the end times. And he said, because we have an understanding that it has been revealed and uncovered to us that the end towards which all things are moving is the reconciliation and renewal of all things in Christ. And that's our goal, that's our city to come.
Right.
And it's based upon that idea that we stake everything on the resurrection, not as guarantee, but as that is who God is and what God does.
Amen.
When we bring ourselves and our whole selves, even at the cost of our own lives, to the task. So I just wanted to thank you for calling to that part of us and to me.
Thank you.
I'm deeply grateful for that reminder. Thank you.
Thank you. So you're saying actually we're bringing, I don't mean this pejoratively at all, that we're bringing coals to Newcastle. Like you already have this stuff.
I'm not super, I don't know all the differences of like Catholic and all the other denominations and stuff, other than that I like talking about this with everyone here. And it all involves Jesus. forgiveness of sins, avoiding a Vajrayana myth, and how do you keep doing that? Do you have to choose an institution or a building, or how? Like, it seems like we're all on the same many pages.
Well, I would, that's a difficult question, because there's so much history and thought involved in that. It's really difficult to answer categorically. But I would tend to go along with, well, you try to be part of something like what we're doing. The Basilian Network? Basilian Network. Yeah. What's it say?
It's out of Star Trek.
Oh, really? Okay.
Not scientific
Yeah.
necessarily.
Try to hook into, to relate to a group of people who are pursuing this very consciously. And it doesn't have to be a church. It doesn't have to be a Sunday organization, or anything that tries to recruit members as such. But is intentionally on this kind of journey, and it can be learning more. It can be trying to teach it yourself, and it involves, I think, outreach to the churches, in the plural, because all the churches can learn from this.
All the people. All the people can learn.
All the people can learn.
Not just the churches.
I know. Well, okay, all right.
I get that. I think that the churches could be a marvelous resource for the work of Jesus. Oh, I wonder. Maybe they should be, but yeah.
Which was a national coming together at Bethany Center, and I told my wife is not so much on board on this journey as I am, but she'll come along. But we flew to New York, and they hosted us. There was about 75, 80 people there for a weekend, and it was just to celebrate this message of nonviolence, biblical nonviolence, with music, food, songs, dancing, discussions, praying, Taizé praying, and just everything that they have to offer to that are markers of community, early pre-Christian community. And for me, what really moved me was they invited the local Muslim community to participate in that. And so Tibor and John Kubat, who that came? And they were part of our, ice-breaking activities, and Heather was there, and I got to see all these people that I only knew on Zoom, to see them in person. But a couple years later, they, were in communication with Tony and Linda and the group via Zoom, and then they said, oh, we're not having Bible study this week because we're going to the iftar for Ramadan with the local community. And I thought, wow, I wonder, one of these days, if I could be invited in LA where I live, because that would be a big thing theologically, or a scandal for my church community to know that I'm doing that. I go, but if they can do it, and there's that invitation of brotherhood, sisterhood, I should be doing that too. So we hosted in 2000 a weekend of nonviolence retreat in our home, styled after what I had seen, and it was for my church community and neighbors. And the contacts that they have with the Muslim community, which is a Turkish group that are dedicated to nonviolence under their persecution of the government and other situations. 2 representatives came from the LA community to our house. So we've maintained a friendship for Friendsgiving, summer events. We went to the museum, we did the concerts. And 2 weeks ago, I was invited by them. It was very moving. My whole family went to their iftar celebration during Ramadan. So it's not just for Christians. It's for all peoples who are marked by violence, who want to look for a path out of violence.
He's such a subversive figure in religion.
In a way, in Australia anyway, it's been a while since any Christians have been crucified, but our Indigenous brothers and sisters and Muslims are very much familiar with that, so we probably have a lot to learn.
My hearing aids at home, and sorry, can you just say that again? She's next to me.
I said our Indigenous brothers and sisters are more familiar with being crucified than most Christians.
Thank you.
And Muslims as well.
I just didn't get it.
Didn't quite catch it. Yep. Yeah. Very provocative. Thank you, Holly. Any other comments, questions?
I was very taken with what you said yesterday, Tony, about that thing about if you're hearing people being non-violent, it has an effect in yourself.
Yes, it does.
And I was thinking about how that's the important responsibility that I have about not being violent in my writing or my letters to politicians, etc., that type of thing. I found that very, very important. But I've been thinking this morning, we've been talking about that whole concept of how we are just born to imitate,
Yes.
and we are going to imitate someone,
Yes.
and I have to bring that back to me. I'm thinking, who am I imitating?
Right.
Because I will be, and I'm thinking, I don't imitate, but I do, and therefore the rivalry. But it made me think of that lovely quote of Girard's that I have not been able to really find the actual reference for, where he says, if we do not imitate Christ or Christ-like figures, we will fall into rivalry and violence. It's that Christ-like figures, and that brings in each other, really. We can so learn from each other. And anyway, it's that.
Really helpful. Yeah.
Without a doubt. I mean, that is the point of community. And as Linda often says, that even in a small group, which is what we are, you can have, 6, 7, 8 people feeling bad about themselves or about the world, and not presenting a very positive model in some ways, being critical or whatever. But there's always going to be one person who's in tune with the Holy Spirit and with Christ, and you can look to that person. And I think as a practical fact, that you need to check out the person who's closest to Christ on a given morning.
That's cool.
That's basically what we try to do on Sunday is just reaffirm over and over, refocus ourselves, bring ourselves, center ourselves again and again and again and sometimes you just show up but someone will preach the word, in either in
both in words and
or their prayer or something.
Their attitude.
Or just they communicate love to you in some way, and you're back in the kingdom. I mean, that's
Jesus promised that. Where two or three gather together,
yeah,
I'll always be there.
One person can't do it alone. You can't do it on your own because the world, and by the world I mean how we're programmed to be mimetic, and the world is always pulling us towards violence and rivalry. So, but in community, you just keep refocusing yourself on the kingdom. What's actually the pearl, the treasure, and the more it's a practice. It's like when we were in the Eastern nonviolence. It's a discipline. That's kind of what it is. It's like a daily, weekly discipline.
Matt.
Oh, man.
Is at the end of a day and a half, this is the funny question where I find myself in, but it's kind of practical. When I go home, I have a very smart friend, a very intelligent, learned academic man who calls himself a Christian Platonist. And
wow.
So my question, the question in my mind is, what on earth am I going to say to him?
Yeah.
And I wonder if you have a tip or two.
I wonder what, sorry?
A tip
or two, yeah. Well, that reminds me of John Milbank. I mean, I don't know, he's a follower of Milbank, but Plato, I mean, as I was saying with the Greeks, you know, it was an enormous cultural intervention. He actually should read my forthcoming book, you know, which is called Love's Entanglement. But basically, Plato did this intervention. I mean, like, when I was in the Department of Religion, it was a phrase they always use, you know, a lever of intervention. If you want to change thinking, you've got to have a lever of intervention. So you've got to be able to poke something into the process of thinking and twist it around somehow or other. That's what postmodernism does. But Plato really had a very significant lever of intervention, Plato and Socrates, and they looked at things intellectually. And that's the key. It's the intellectual worldview and perspective. And it very quickly it attains a kind of independence. It belongs to another world. And even if you don't believe there is a heavenly world of forms, there is an intellectual world which is superior. So if you go to Cambridge or Oxford, they all live in that little heavenly world of ideas. They do. Whereas if you look at Jesus and Paul Ricoeur, I kind of got this from him, that Socrates, when he dies, and it's described a number of times, his death is described a number of times in Plato's dialogue. So it's kind of like, Socrates' death almost has the same role in the Platonic dialogues as Jesus' death. And Paul Ricoeur says that Socrates dies in serenity and otherworldly vision, you know, like that's what he does. He pulls a towel up over his face, you know, because he doesn't want to see the world. He wants to be in the world of eternal contemplation. But Ricoeur, out of nowhere, says, unlike Jesus, I mean, he's not talking about, it's only mention of Jesus in the whole book. Why should he sort of throw Jesus in there? But he does. Unlike Jesus, who dies in agony and abandonment, calling out. So they're very, very different deaths. And they're both, the deaths are both pivotal to the way in which you understand the world, the universe. And the intellectual attitude basically is an aristocratic attitude. It belongs to the powerful and the wealthy, those who've got time and ability and space to be in that world, to be in that vision. It's a very, very powerful construct because the mind is something, and he used that ability of the mind to focus and to have ideas. I mean, he created the idea, the idea of the idea, all that kind of stuff. So there's something. My thing is there's something removed about it, and that's going to be a challenge to your friend. There's something removed about that, whereas what we're talking about is grounded. There's a peasant woman somewhere or other in Colombia, or I don't know, Namibia or something, whose everything is done. She has no more recourse, and she's going to die. But who's next to her in that condition? Who can possibly give her hope and maybe get her out of it? Is it Socrates or is it Jesus? No, it's Jesus who accompanies everybody in their abandonment. And that's the resurrection hope. So I would say that, yes, it's beautiful what you say and what you see, but it's not a solution. It's not. So, well. Oh, okay.
We can't think ourselves out of this. We have to love each other out of this. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's right. I mean, Plato had no solution to violence, except get rid of the poets. I mean, that's what Girard is always talking about, Got to throw the poets out because they talk about violence.
Well, there's something...
She wanted to say something. She.
There was this book that I read called Metaphysical Animals, and it was really interesting because you have G. Anscombe and Iris Murdoch, Philippa Foot, and the men are off at war, and they are these amazing thinkers, and the men are kind of in this world of ideas, and all these women come from like completely different backgrounds, wouldn't agree on much, but they kind of, it seemed absurd to these guys pondering this stuff while Nazism was happening, and they kind of, well, certainly Anscombe brought Catholicism into the academy in a kind of very real way that was in the world and intellectual. Metaphysical Animals. It's about the group of them.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's a good final word, because our time is done. Unless there's anything that's aching to be said or asked. I think we're cooked.
Well, thank you for attending. Thank you for being
Thank you, Anthony.